We're living through unprecedented times. The COVID 19 pandemic that is ravaging and devastating the world. Nobody remembers anything like this. The world is quite literally locked down, and most of us are locked in. And I want to be careful not to say anything hasty or self assured. But I would still like to share with us three things that all of us can do and all of us can be. First of all, we can be prayerful. This pandemic is something that is beyond us and beyond the powers of this world. I know most of us are praying, but this is a time to be more intentional and intense in our prayers. The website of World Vision gives three particular groups of people that we can be praying for. First, pray for people who are infected with COVID 19 or facing quarantine. Secondly, pray for people at higher risk of developing the disease who are more likely than others to become severely ill from COVID 19. Thirdly, pray for medical professionals, caregivers, researchers, and leaders responsible for decisions about fighting the new coronavirus. And of course, we must pray for ourselves, for God's protection, God's healing, and God's help. And we must not just pray, but pray intentionally, continually, and regularly. I suggest we pray for the situation at least 4 times a day, if not more: morning, midday, evening, and night. And if necessary, we must fast and pray. Secondly, we must be prudent. To be prudent is to show care and thought. It is about using good judgments in avoiding risks and uncertainties. Yes, we believe God and we believe His promises, but we must also believe experts and their advices, and we must comply with them. Apart from personal hygiene and regular sanitizing, experts tell us that during a pandemic, social distancing is one of the few and most effective ways of slowing and containing the spread of the disease. And this social distancing includes increasing physical space between individuals, working from home, closing schools and colleges, visiting relatives and friends electronically, not personally, and canceling or postponing events and gatherings. These changes can cause immense inconvenience and stress, but we must be prudent and we must comply. We live in extraordinary times, and extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. During the Great Bubonic Plague, which devastated Europe in the 14th through 16th centuries, the great reformer Martin Luther he said this: "I shall ask God mercifully to protect us. Then I shall fumigate, help purify the air, administer medicine, and take medicine. I shall avoid places and persons where my presence is not needed, in order not to become contaminated and thus infect and pollute others, and so cause their death as a result of my negligence." In other words, he was prudent. Thirdly, we must be productive. We must not waste our time in useless chatter, endless conjecture, or indulgent pleasure. If we plan carefully, this extraordinary time can be very fruitfully used. We can bond with our immediate families, our marriage life can be renewed and refreshed, our relation with our parents, children, or siblings can be strengthened or healed. We can sleep better and catch up on the sleep that we have been missing all along. We can read more and write more. We can try and acquire new skills or improve on existing ones. We can donate financial and other resources to those who require them. We can pray and meditate deeper. And through it all, we can find ourselves again and be found by God again. It feels like we have all collectively been thrown in at the deep end, and it looks like we are in it for the long haul. But we must remember that we are in this together. We are all, for once, the whole world on the same side. It is us, humanity, versus it, COVID 19, the other. And in the midst of it all stands the one who walked on water, the one who also became breathless, but the one who now lives forever and who will see us through.
The usually somber and grey season of Lent is this year becoming and turning out to be more somber and dark than ever. How could we, in such a time, follow Jesus? Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, he had his Last Supper with his disciples. And then he rose from supper. He poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet. After doing this, Jesus says to his disciples that he had done this to give them an example that they should do as he had done. There are three areas in which we can be servant leaders and leaders in service and servanthood. The first area is the home. In this difficult time, let us learn to serve one another at home. Let us learn to be servants at home. The second is the church. The church is also going through very difficult times. Let us consider how we can serve one another in the church and how we can serve the church as a whole. This will require creativity, out-of-the-box thinking, improvisation, planning, and execution. But let us consider how we can serve the church. Third, and most importantly, the world. The individual Christian can think about how he can be a servant in his individual professional life and in his social or her social and community life. The corporate church can think about being a servant in the world. The church can easily become preoccupied and obsessed with its own affairs. It can become very narrow, petty, and parochial, while the hurting and dying world is waiting outside. The church often fails to engage with the outside world, and when it does, it only preaches, teaches, and rebukes. It gives rejoinders, press releases, and petitions. But the calling of the church is to serve the world. The Son of Man did not come into this world to be served, but to serve, Jesus said. And Jesus also said, "As the Father has sent me, so send I you." Jesus then goes on to say, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you. You must love one another." What is new about this commandment? Leviticus 19:18 says, "You shall love your neighbor as you love yourself." But that is the old commandment. Here Jesus says, "You shall love one another, not as you love yourself, but as I have loved you." This is the new aspect of the new commandment. The New Testament is full of pleas and urgings to love one another, book after book, chapter after chapter, page after page, verse after verse. Love one another. In the period following the apostolic age, there was an exuberant caring and sharing on the part of Christians that was unique in the ancient world. Julian the Apostate, who was an enemy of Christianity, even he had to admit, the godless Galileans, he said, fed not only their poor, but ours also. Tertullian wrote that Christians' deeds of love were so noble that the pagan world confessed in astonishment, "See how they love one another." By AD 250, Christians in Rome were caring for about 1,500 needy people in Rome. Bishop Dionysius of Corinth could note that they were sending supplies to many churches in every city. Christians also provided for those who had lost their jobs. And their joyful sharing was not just confined to Christians. Bishop Chrysostom, he said, "Every day the church here feeds 3,000 people. The church daily helped provide food and clothes for prisoners, the hospitalized, pilgrims, cripples, and others." When epidemics broke out in Carthage and Alexandria, Christians rushed to aid all in need. Now it is clear that in this season and in this crisis, we will not be able to serve one another or the world in exactly the same way that the early Christians did. But that does not mean that we cannot serve at all. We may not be able to do much, but that doesn't mean that we cannot do anything. We may not be able to serve many, but that doesn't mean that we cannot serve any. May God use us as individuals and as a church to follow Jesus, not just to be servant leaders, but to be leaders in servanthood, leaders in service.